Hey everyone, it's Mary Carg again for the final installment of the Kingfisher. Uh, I've gone ahead and made a little piece of brass. It's an L-shaped piece. Um, and I've just got some pattern brass that I like to use. This is what's going to form the catch and the hinge for the pin. And I don't like to solder a whole lot. If I can cold connect something, that's my go-to. So I went ahead and already cut this out. And I did like we did in the other video where we were drilling holes and matching up the, as we go with the pins and everything. So I've drilled a hole here, and I've drilled the hole in here for this end, and this part will flip over and that'll be the catch, and then I'll roll this down and that'll be the hinge for the pin back. I've also gone, there were a couple holes in here where the wing is going to go, so I went ahead and drilled those out also so it didn't impede the riveting at all. So the other thing I did before the video was to take a little piece of I like to use the nichrome 20 gauge wire. It's readily available. It's used for e-cigarettes, so you can find them in any e-cig shops, or I usually get mine on Amazon. But I'm using the 20 gauge, and I went ahead and I like to use a belt sander, but you can do this on your flex shaft. You can do it old school with files and sandpaper, but I don't know if you can see that. It's really sharp, and that's going to be my pin back. So the first thing I want to do, I've got these are actually aluminum or nickel coated brass escutcheon pins. I decided that I like the silver look better than the yellow of the brass, so I've got a few of those. I've got these are 2x2 crimp tubes that I get from Rio. I get the escutcheon pins from a place called woodworkingparts.com. I like to use some tweezers. It helps me pick up some of these little bitty parts because this is 20 gauge and they're kind of small, and the crimp tubes are definitely kind of small. But first thing I'm going to do is pick up a escutcheon pin, and I'm going to put that in there. And I have some Loctite super glue. This is the gel control. I like to use the gel control. I just seems to work a little bit better for me. I end up not gluing my fingers to everything, and I just think it's a little less messy. So I'm going to pick up my crimp tube. I'm going to slide this down, and the Loctite super glue will hold that in place while we rivet. Oops. And I'm going to do that for all of these. Put a little glue at the base here. Slide that down, push it in place. And I want to make sure that these guys are all standing up straight, because when I go to put that on that, it's kind of important for actually getting them all lined up and getting them to go if they're nice and straight. So I'm going to go ahead and finish all of that, and I'll be right back. So I've got all my escutcheon pins threaded through the wing. They're glued on there with the super glue. I decided when I was fiddling with it off camera that to remove the crimp tubes from the top of the wing. I thought it looked a little bit more natural if it would be more flush to his body, and so I'm just keeping these crimp tubes in here to lift the wing off the bottom body of the Kingfisher, to make him look like he's actually flapping his wing a little bit. I've got all of the pins started in the holes that we drilled, and I'm just going to start by and I'm going to try not to poke myself with these sharp little pins. take my metal block that's been covered with some tape and push that down really good so that it's making really good contact. Push down this some more. Actually going to take this and kind of gently push these down so that they're flush. And there, that's what he's going to look like. So the next thing we're going to do is to do some riveting. I do riveting a little different than maybe a lot of people. You know, I have been very selective in making sure that I pick the right drill bit to go with the right size escutcheon pin or wire or whatever you're going to use. So the holes are really tight, therefore I don't need a lot of metal. I think you'll see some people telling you to leave a playing card or a credit card or so many millimeters, and I always tell my students to cut these. I have a pair of Lindstrom flush cutters. I cut that flush, and so I'll make sure that's making really good contact. These have a tendency to fly, so I'm going to hang on to that, and I'm going to take my, I like to use a ball peen hammer rather than, get that out of the way, rather than your traditional riveting hammer. I like that it's rounded on the edge there, and I can really get in there and really see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to lightly hammer this. So I'm just flaring that metal over the hole so it'll make, and that's stuck on there really well. Okay, go around here and do the rest. The glue really helps to keep everything in place while you're riveting, so things aren't slipping out and falling out on you. Go ahead and clip these all off. If I didn't have the glue in there, I would be fighting with the rivets falling out. And this way I can clip them all off. That's still a little high. Okay, there's my little pin. All right, so the next thing we want to do is take our round nose pliers, and I'm going to flip this back a little bit, and then I'm going to roll this down. So that's going to be my catch. And I'm going to take this in, start rolling this down. And that's my hinge. Okay. All right. So then, this is a little tricky and a little fiddly for folks sometimes, but it might take a little practice. I'm just going to curve this ever so slightly. Try not to jab myself with the pin because it is really sharp. And I'm going to put this in the non-sharp end down into the hinge part. And I'm going to put this down in the catch. So we have looks like that. And I want this to stick out a little bit at this point because I'm going to do some maneuvering and some bending, and that'll shorten it up so it's not sticking out. Won't be quite so lethal. But the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to take this end here. Make sure I can get it on camera well enough. I'm going to just twirl this around here. Take some needle nose pliers. Make sure that's tightened up there. Take my flush cutters. Oops. I'm going to cut this right where it meets. Tighten that up, squeeze that up so it's nice and tight. Okay, it's going to make a fool out of me. There we go. All right. So at this point, I've got it all in there so it won't fall out, but as you can see, it doesn't have much tension. It's kind of floppy. So I'm going to take the next thing. I'm going to take my needle nose pliers. I'm going to bend this back on itself a little bit if I can get the right angle and still have you all see. So I've got that kind of angle, and then that will give this lots of tension, and it'll slide up there and hold in place so it won't fall out. And that's your pin. Last thing I'm going to do is put some Renaissance wax on it, and I'm going to put some little dots with some of my favorite golden acrylic paint, and I'll be right back with the supplies for that. So I've got my smelly but useful Renaissance wax. I've just applied a little bit of this. A little bit goes a long way, and all over his body. Before I riveted, I did the part underneath so I'd be able to get to it, but this just adds a nice final seal. And I know I said it in the previous videos, but before you apply this, you want to really make sure you've got a good coat of the acrylic spray on here, because there is nothing worse than having to get into this point. You think you're finished, you put the Renaissance wax on when you've forgotten to do that last layer of spray, and the Renaissance wax at that point will act like a solvent against the color pencil, and it'll take the whole thing right off. It'll just make a mess. So I can't say that enough. So this has been sitting there for a minute. I've got this old cotton t-shirt that I like to use to kind of gently buff. And this just makes the bird look really just really lustrous, I think, and he's got such a nice shine, but without it being really totally glossy. I know some people like to seal their things with glossy and have it really blingy and shiny, but that's kind of not my thing. You certainly like that, you can go right ahead and use the glossy acrylic spray. Experiment with that, but I like the combo of the matte acrylic spray and the color pencil and the Renaissance wax. So I don't know if you can see that well enough, but it's just really lustrous and gives it a nice shine without being too shiny. Okay. Oops. Okay, the very last step after putting on the Renaissance wax is I like to put some little dots of paint. This is Golden Brand Iridescent Pearl. I like to use this one and the gold and the silver. They add nice little shimmery dots or little other little drawings, little marks on your color pencil. It's the last thing you want to do. And I just have this really fine little toothbrush. You can use a toothpick too if you're going to do fine little dots. And I'll just apply them randomly wherever I feel it needs it. Sometimes you have little accidents that happen while you're riveting, and you might need to cover up a little gouge rather than going back and redoing the whole thing. And I always say paint can hide a multitude of sins, and add a little flair, a little flourish. So that's my little Kingfisher. Hope you enjoyed the videos, and if you have any questions, you can reach me at marykargdesigns@msn.com. Thanks so much. Bye.